Perfect. So and now change it around to do a research step first. And I would say that's the main difference from before to now. And there's a lot of different ways to do this research step. There's other skills that I would also recommend. We've put together our version of this for go-to-market. Do you have a particular type of prospecting in mind?
Yeah, I'm using Deepline right now to power enrichment, like in my application, and using it more so around like I'll give you guys the accounts that the customer is interested in, and those might be closed won, pipeline, etc. And then I'm looking to expand that based on certain titles, but also like it could be like a broader search for like, hey, these are the kind of what you were saying, the exact criteria of what this customer falls into, and I want to find 100 customers that look just like that. And then I have like company enrichment services that go into that, and then I look to use you guys to find the titles and waterfall it, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two types of things I would do here. One is to do a pre-research on the vertical or industry that they're in and get a better, like basically give the agent more high-level context on what might matter in this space. So I can show an example from cybersecurity and how we went about that. Or if there's something top of mind for you, I can just run something live here. If you have like a more specific, just high-level vertical.
It's fine. I think any example.
Okay.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Correct. So I can do Deepline pre-research, find public, private, and industry-specific data sources for KYC, user identity verification, and for companies. Let's say B2B companies. Let's just do companies that may need like persona, proof, what is them? FIDO and FIDO. Okta. Cool. And so what this is going to do is it's going to do like a web search, kind of look at those companies, those industries, and just get like a very, very high level understanding of what like core concepts might be relevant there. And this isn't required, but I do think it's helpful because it gives the agent in the next step a really good understanding of all the potential levers to test. And so let me do one more step here. And you don't have to do this on like every run. This is the high level model I follow. And it pretty consistently gets good results. So just want to make sure we're doing that effectively. And so can you guys see my screen here? Niche signal sample report.
Yep.
Cool. So this is kind of one step after that pre-research. And the reason I do the research before is you want to know what concepts on the signals could be relevant. So the first step is figure out what is relevant to what I'm trying to find. And then the second step is find every possible signal on those accounts. So I usually run this with like a close one, close loss list. And I've probably shown this to a lot of folks in here too many times, but the pattern kind of repeats over and over again. And we have a skill that does this. What it's actually doing is the same thing you would probably do if you did this analysis manually, which is look at what's common on the wins versus the losses, do an analysis of like, all right, what percentage of our wins are in this industry or this have these types of roles present. We're just doing it programmatically at scale. So the input here is the wins and losses. What it's going to do is, this is kind of the underlying piece that all the context or the copy is reflecting, but it is looking at keywords on the websites. It's looking at who they're hiring, the job titles. It's looking at tech stack. You can add any custom concept in here as well. So I have that example of like mining safety companies where the government tracks mining safety events, and that's a good input for who might be a good fit. So it's super specific to the vertical company that you're looking into. The goal is just to get a broad set of features that are relevant and then test them. The reason you need the relevance is the agent kind of needs to know what to extract from all of the different signals or what signals to test out. I'll stop there. Any questions on kind of what I'm saying here? it's still pretty high level. So feel free to push on anything.
Well, no, I think what you're saying is that you would recommend just building in an approach where you're actually finding things that would put people on a almost like a scoring hierarchy of relevancy for prospecting, and then you would go and find that person.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like another approach to lookalike modeling. That's effectively what we're doing here, right? We're saying who looks like our wins and not like our losses. The reason this is helpful for prospecting and why I think it's a little different than the old world is all of those filters that you can turn all those features into filters. And now when you go prospecting, you can say, all right, go try every provider and find all the ones that mention FDIC on their website. And then we have Disco-like or Serper. That's now pretty easy to do in one of your providers because we have a provider that is able to work with this particular signal. The scoring model here, which titles are present at a particular company. There's a job titles endpoint from Deepline native that lists every job title that we have in that particular data source at a company. So you can go and say, all right, now we found the companies, we scored the companies. What roles are the most relevant? You can run this exact same process on which titles have responded to your outbound or which opportunities, contact roles on opportunities. So the pattern is kind of the same over and over of show me what good looks like and what not good looks like. And then let's give the system kind of guidance on a scoring system. You don't need like an official scoring system, but you kind of want to give it more like this, less like this, and then have it try a bunch of different filters to find the ones that are a good fit for you. So I can run an example here and say, cool. So here I found some. Okay.
I was just gonna flag. I think this is really cool. The only thing that I would run into is I think this is like a really good methodology to apply toward like an entire customer, like all of their accounts. I'm just having to think through like territory logic. So I'm thinking through like how that fits into that. You know what I mean?
How it fits into territory logic.
Yeah, like because if I'm running prospecting, I'm having to surface this for like 6 or 7 different sales reps. So I guess I don't know. I'm trying to balance like how do I not incur like a ton of costs up front for something like this, like polling it.
Yeah. Yep.
Versus I could see that world if I did it for the entire company and I did it in a smart way. You know what I mean?
Got it. So it is not expensive to do what I just showed you. Most of that is going to be like close to free just in that scoring system. That run that I just showed you, which was 200 accounts, was less than $30 to do once. So it is some upfront cost, but then you can reuse it over and over again. We can also start at the account level. It doesn't really matter. Again, the input is what has worked in the past, just good examples, bad examples. So find all titles at, I need some account list at the Fortune 500 that would be relevant based on historicals. Use the Deepline native job titles endpoint. Oops. So what this is going to do is it's going to go get all the job titles. These are going. I probably shouldn't have done Fortune 500 because that's going to return a lot. But if let's say let's just do at a sample. To a sample of 10. Cool. So both the company, we have a free company database and this company titles endpoint. Between those, you shouldn't spend any money. So the goal is just to get signals that are relevant and then show historically what's worked. Same thing with like last 100 calls that went well, last 100 calls that didn't. Historicals are always going to be better at explaining what your target customer is than like your my ability to explain in filter definitions what I'm trying to do. Does that differ from like your experience?
No, it's helpful. I'm still like trying to think about how I even think about it. You know, I think it's like it's the logic. No. Yeah, the logic and process though. I really like that framework.
Yeah, so the way we deploy this for our customers is we do that scoring model first once at the company level, just one time up front. And then after that, we will go through and do the job titles, news, relevant signals, who's coming or going. You can use super simple filters like, hey, if they have the word fraud or KYC in their title, they're probably relevant to what we're doing here. Or you could do more scoring based of, okay, there's 10 roles, let's try to figure out which one it is. You can also go down to like the LinkedIn backgrounds and what they describe as their job function. For particular customers, you have to go that deep because what they're doing is so specific that the average VP of engineering doesn't care, but there is one who does. So it kind of depends on the type of filtering you need to do or how specific what you're doing is. But the overall model, I think that pretty consistently I've seen work is a lot of examples of what you're trying to do and back into what the filter should be to produce those examples. So start at the end, and then for all the accounts within the 6 reps that you're going towards, potentially score the accounts like super lightweight scoring. Don't spend a ton of time on it. Just which accounts are most like our wins and least like our losses. And our skill is really good at doing that relatively cost effectively. And then within the top ones, the same approach of get all the titles that are relevant, find the ones, and then figure out like where in the job you should be looking. Yeah, probably should have picked smaller companies, but we have 244,000 titles.
It's all good. I mean, even to hear you kind of like how you think through the framework is helpful.
Perfect. So it's filtering for those KYC IDB ones, and yeah, but we'll get to something. Team lead, risk management. So you're just going to keep iterating. Yeah, examples is the short answer. Examples, and then let the system try to figure out which filters generate those examples most consistently. Cool. I'll let this run for a second while we come back here. Does that any thoughts there? Anybody else have questions?
How are these job titles populated?
It's from that provider, so Deepline Native, which is a middle of the. It's not as high accuracy as maybe like People Data Labs, but it is a free endpoint. So I'd say it's 85% coverage, does pretty solid at the top end of company roles. So good executive coverage, which is pretty critical for what we're generally trying to do with this function. That said, you can also like use it first and then exclude from. We're working on putting this into a skill, but you can use job titles, and then whoever you get there, if you don't get someone that you're really happy with, you can go down the waterfall, exclude everyone that you found the first time, or all the job titles you found, go to cross data, do the same thing, exclude the job titles, exclude the contacts that you found, and then there's one more. People Data Labs will also let you filter in that way. So you can use what you found as an exclusion and then keep going. And eventually you should get to pretty much every person at a company, very high coverage with pretty minimal cost, because you're only paying for the ones that either were not in Deepline Native, which is usually about 10 to 15% of the company, more towards the younger, lower tenure folks. And you're paying between 5 cents and 25 cents for People Data Labs, which is expensive to get that like last chunk. So net, you're typically spending less than 3 cents. Cool. No, I got pretty deep in the weeds there. So let me know if anything stands out as a follow-up there, things we can send after the call. That job titles endpoint is definitely one that I think we're underutilizing across the platform. It's super powerful, very high like coverage, all things considered, and very up to date. So pretty happy with it. Would definitely recommend just playing around with it for any
I recently discovered it kind of accidentally by the recommendation of the and then figured it out that it's you kind of can quickly get the titles and then narrow it down, because what I'm trying to do is like get maximum 2 contacts, and one of them must be like CEO founder, and the other one must be like operations leader that is satisfying some criteria. And yeah, that usually helps.
Yeah. There's almost all the providers have like some sort of pattern to do like a either a lower cost check or a free check that doesn't give you all the information, but lets you do that qualification step. Like Apollo hides the last name and email and gives you a title. People Data Labs has the same functionality. So we definitely need to get better on like surfacing that and making it easier to do that prospecting step. But right now, I'd say job titles is the most reliable way, because you can also do an exact match on those job titles. So once you find the job titles that you like, it will return the exact person. And Deepline Native is generally very, very cost effective as well. Cool. Awesome.
I wanted to get a POV from you guys. I'm building right now for one of my clients a sales command center, if you will. Here, I'll show you kind of like a demo of what I'm doing. And I want Deepline to power it. So pain. Well, it's a pain because oftentimes what we have in CRM is not the legal entity name, right? And for documents that are going to be sent off for signature, it has to be the legal entity name plus the address that legal entity is tied to. Mm-hmm. And so there's two things there, right? One, POV on rep tooling and how to incorporate Deepline to the rep tooling. And then two, like that middle of the funnel question, which we could park, I guess, if we want, but that's something that's been on my mind, is more middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, like GTM flows where Deepline can kind of like weave into.
Perfect. Those are both very interesting problems. The first one, I have some thoughts. The second one should be pretty solvable. The way I would think about it is, I know that there's like People Data Labs would be really good at that, but they're generally more expensive. So like 10 cents per company.
Yeah, well, they won't care at that point, because if they're at that point and they're trying to close Coca-Cola, but they need like the literally like then 10 cents is like, then they won't care.
Yeah, I think so. The Secretary of State data would be pretty good here as well.
There's one challenge there of doing business as names versus LLC names. So if like our official product name is called Deepline, our legal entity is Arrow AI Labs. So those
that's
just
exactly what I mean.
Yeah. So that mapping, there are some ways to do that and like break through the Secretary of State stuff, but it's a little more painful. I would probably just pay People Data Labs. They're pretty good.
That's what actually, maybe we could park it, because I know it's more complex than I think it is. And
there's two other providers that we're adding. One other provider we're adding to the platform called Kernel.ai that specializes in only this problem. Like that is all they do, and they are very, very good. So that is kind of in a pilot right now. We'll let them. We'll have them live in the platform pretty soon. They're even more expensive than People Data Labs because they do like the full like corporate hierarchy, split everything out, tell you all the subsidiaries. But People Data Labs should be really good at that. This is actually a really good question for like the Deepline pre-research task skill I just showed you. If you describe what you're trying to do, it'll go check which of our data sources would be the best at going legal entity to personal, or like a DBA or company name. My gut is People Data Labs is going to be the best option, just from my recollection, but I could see like Crest Data or something else being a better, more cost-effective option. But that pre-research skill should answer that pretty effectively. Awesome. On the rep-facing side, so the goal there is a Claude Code plugin. Is there a specific reason you picked that like functionality to be a plugin or an MCP?
Yeah, let me tell you, the thought process here was that like I was going to try to get my enterprise account executive on Cowork, but even that was kind of like too much.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, fuck, what do I do, right? And so then I was like, oh, what if I built an MCP with like, you know, all of the things that he has as a desire to automate, and then maybe even add like a semantic layer to, because, you know, maybe he says, I want you to write an email, and then another request he asks, I want you to draft an email, right? Like just kind of do a semantic layer on top of that so that it works kind of effectively. And then, you know, he may not know the names by heart, but if he says enrich this, really what he means is go use Deepline, run a query, and like do that, right? So like that's why I chose to go through, and that was a connector, not a skill, actually.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose. That was the thought process. Now I don't know if I don't know if what I'm thinking is like best practice, but it works sort of.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get your guys' POV on like for someone that does not want to go into co-work, wants to stay in the most basic thing possible. I mean, if even if possible, like stay in CRM or Slack or whatever, right? Like, what's the best way to build something like this where it's a command center for the sales rep, SDR, AE, CSM, whoever?
Yeah, there's two ways I would consider. So one is that exactly what you're doing. The MCP option should work. What might be easier? Did you start with like our plugin as the like underlying?
No, not at all.
Got it. So
that one that you see there, a lot of the things are in render, right? So when it calls render, there's already the Deepline API key tied to it.
Oh, got it. Okay, I see what's going on then. In that case, what the other kind of deployment model we have? So yeah, there's two ways I think about this. In the plugin view, we are also releasing. We have an MCP that is live and working. It actually works really well in ChatGPT. It doesn't work quite as well in Claude for some reason. I haven't gotten it to work as well in Claude, but it's pretty killer for ChatGPT, and ChatGPT worked. But that is based on this plugin here, and this plugin you should be able to kind of pare down and say like what you're trying to do. Yeah. How does this work?
This would be a specific only Deepline plugin, right? Or
I might be misunderstanding how this is deployed. So let's table that one. The other one is I've sent this around a couple times. So what this repo is, this Deepline GTM agent is, let me move this down. So what we are doing is essentially setting it up to work on a server, and then the entry point you can have can be an API or an MCP, or it can be like a Slack bot. How you access the agent, it's pretty flexible to whatever your use case is. Is the desired use case for it to be more deterministic, or do you want like that full Claude code?
Well, it's a mix, right? It's deterministic would be go fetch these records. We're working on this account. That's like for sure, like we know what that is. But the generative part of this would be I want to launch a campaign for these people that are going to this particular event where the theme is going to be about this. So compose a sequence that talks about this in our voice or whatever. So like that part is not deterministic, which is why I thought in my head MCP would be great, because you can pull the deterministic like flows, and then have all the generative stuff go into for example, a destination might be HeyReach, and you're going to put in all the copy in every step in HeyReach, right?
Yeah. So I'm trying to just get a list of people.
And mind you, if like obviously like if this is like something more complex to jam on, I'm happy to pull some time on the side, and maybe we can meet to figure out how to deploy this for our client.
10 signups in HubSpot. So hopefully this works. I haven't seen if it's running recently. But so yeah, this is the Deepline GTM agent. What this is doing, okay, so I have it disabling write actions. Normally it can actually do anything you can do in the CLI. So pull the leads and drop the campaigns. But that's more so just a setting. Do you want it to be able to write to a different platform? How this is structured is it's essentially the CLI or same thing that you're using in Claude Code and Cowork, but you can deploy it anywhere, and then you can wrap it however you want. So the benefit of doing it this way versus just having like a Claude Cowork is you can constrain what you're doing, and you can give it specific skills that are very specific to what you're trying to do. So for example,
let me understand what you're saying. You're saying like build a CLI for this, but how would I get it to go inside of In this case, it was Slack, right?
Yeah.
That's your medium or the
Yes.
service rate for the rep? Okay.
Let me see if I have this here. So here is, so Deepline is here. We add a kind of like router on top of it. So now with this router, you can use Slack, you can use an API, or you can even create like a web app that can just use Deepline anywhere, right? So you could use Slack to give that to your sales leader, or you can have it as an MCP using the REST API.
Yep.
So happy to talk about this. But basically all this is doing is letting you host Deepline in the cloud and control what it can do and not do.
Okay.
So it's not full power, do everything that Deepline can do, which might be overwhelming or too confusing. You can kind of constrain it and say, hey, I actually only want you to be able to do these 10 actions, or these, when you get these types of asks, make sure that you do it the exact way that I want you to do it, and limit it, like basically personalize it for your particular use case. But I think this structure should work for either option, the MCP or a Slack bot, depending on what's everyone. And it comes with the Slack bot built in. So you should be able to deploy this on either, you can deploy it on Render. There's some benefits to doing it on Eve, or Eve is like Vercel's agent hosting.
I was going to say I'm not familiar with them.
It's Vercel's thing.
So my hiccup here, or like the what kind of gives me a little bit of constraint, is that if the bot is a Deepline bot only, when a rep says, give me the status on how our campaign is doing, and it only wants to call like instantly, for example, right? Will the agent still pull up like status reports and things like that? That's the question.
This is going to be the same as what you're doing anywhere. You could add any connector you want. So how is that other data set connected?
So again, it goes to Render, and the Render has all the it has a .env file, and it has every single like destination and source available to it for it to call and like get the data that it needs.
So this folder, Deepline GTM agent, should be pretty similar to what you are doing there. So we can take this offline. Happy to talk about it.
We're getting in the weeds, but like this is what I'm working on right now, and I think that if I'm able to crack this nut, then I can replicate this from client to client to client to client, and then you guys are like the underlying engine, like doing all the things.
You can access. This is the same as what you're doing in Render, so you can host this on Render. You can host this anywhere. We're just giving your agent on Render access to Deepline, and that's what this repo does.
Okay, cool. We can, let's target.
Awesome. Cool. Trugger, we only have a couple minutes left. Do you want to do the monitor stuff?
Cool. So it sounds like we did the middle of the funnel thing. Customer database and monitors I'll kind of talk through together. So monitors is a new capability we're launching for basically a way to listen to what's kind of happening on the internet, and then get signals for your target accounts and contacts, and then wire that into workflows that take the signal and then dump it into your system of action. That's Slack, Salesforce, or whatever else is useful for your team. So quickly I can show a demo, and I'll kind of talk through how it works. And I think, Cal, you asked about the customer database, and this will be an example use case of why something like that is really helpful. So the first question I asked, just to kick it off, is a sense of what monitors are available. If you try this right now, you might run into a gate because it's beta gated, but if this is interesting or you guys see a useful use case, just ping me and I'll add you to the beta. The way it works right now is we have a bunch of pre-built monitors, and we're going to be adding a bunch more vendors here, like Jungler, Single Base, etc., to have a super robust way to listen to these types of events. I think one Jay sent me yesterday was listening to changes in the company API docs to kind of see if there's a useful signal there to then run a GTM play off of. But what we're launching with is job openings, new hires at your target accounts lists, promotions, mentions, so mentions in the news, a bunch of other ones here, And then job changes are generally pretty useful and social engagements. And the way it works underneath the hood is when you set up a monitor, it routes the result directly to the customer database. So you never lose data here. The data gets stored, and now I can run plays off of, the last 2 to 3 months or whatever it is of information about who's changed jobs, where and why. And then every time I get an update, right, say someone visits my website or someone is a new hire, I can then spin up a play to then message Slack or update Salesforce, or, it is what it is. Let me make sure I'm showing the right thing here. Cool. So just to visualize what's going on, I might say something like Deepline GTM spin up monitor to track this CSV for new hires, and I'll upload a list of maybe like 1K accounts that I'm tracking. And then as soon as those events hit, I'll be messaged in Slack or Salesforce. The key thing to know about monitors is that all the pricing is outcome-based. So instead of a lot of monitors right now, I think when you use online, they're basically checking every month or every day, and you're charged for every one of those checks. With this implementation and these monitors, you're charged on the outcome, meaning when you actually detect a job opening or a new hire, then that's when you effectively have to pay. I think there's one monitor, potentially job changes, that isn't like that. But as I explore, how much would this cost me to track, let's say 1K accounts, let's say mid-market, and then it generally helps to upload the accounts so we can gauge company size. You can also really use the database as a source if it's something that changes. CRM lists you can do as well. CSV is just kind of the easiest way to get started. And then you can effectively, generally I recommend starting with a few ones that you want to monitor, spin up the Slack play, and then going from there. So let's see, an example of what that looks like. I'm going to go to Deepline. I set up a really simple one for Walmart new hires. And you kind of see all this data coming in. And then the other place that you can access that data is effectively the customer database. So let's switch this up. So I spun up a few monitors yesterday to kind of test things out. And then pretty much every change that I'm tracking is going to just show up here. And as soon as a new row is added, I get pinged in Slack. That's what I've set up through a play. Cool. Any questions on monitors? Curious if folks see use case here, what's interesting, what's less interesting?
I feel like this is what audience is trying to be, or maybe yeah. Am I off on that? Like play audiences, sorry, I should be specific.
In terms of the database piece?
Yeah, because you put it on a frequency in terms of, let's say you have 100,000 records, and and it'll kind of just look for the changes, but I don't know if they charge you for every time it does a query or whatever.
Yeah, we're actually trying to keep the database pretty simple, so it can be very flexible. So effectively, the reason we have a database in the beginning is like almost a staging CRM of like all of the top of funnel stuff that's going on. Usually it's in your sequencer, it's in Clay, it's in these other tools. We're looking to spin up a really easy, simple place to put that information, and almost a data source that's not really, it's like less built for humans as much as it's built for agents, which means it's able to process a ton of data and deal with joining information from HubSpot to these sources to those sources to effectively give agents really, really good context.
Yeah.
One use case that I have is every time we have a meeting, we'll have a Deepline play that runs that summarizes the meeting. And then usually I would just have a email follow-up, and these email follow-ups without context aren't very helpful. For instance, have I already responded to the user? All this stuff needs to kind of be checked. So what I'll have it do is go and query this database. And this database has all of our CRM context. It has replies from ADIO, HubSpot. Every play that I run is being stored in the database. Every enrichment that I run is stored in the database. And every reply, eventually we're spinning up this feature. So a reply from the sequencers are also in the database. So then the agent can kind of create a query. Again, just data. It's very simple. Pull all of that together and then check, hey, have we already replied to this user or not? And if so, let's go ahead and send the follow-up.
That's not audiences. This is like all of your surfaces. What's the context on this particular record? How does it know what record is like the golden record, if you will?
So when you create the play that does all of this stuff, that's when you inject this logic, because that's going to vary right from use case to use case.
Yeah.
And you'll work with the agent to come up with a play that identifies, hey, this is the golden record. This is how I want to join different things. And then you can test the results. It's also helpful to have a database so that you can test what your messages would have looked like on the past 1 or 2 months of data. So that when you turn it on, it's going to give you good results.
Really quick on that, Willie. There's kind of like two ways to think about it. One is build that golden record upfront structurally, and like we've done that historically for enterprise customers of identity resolution. There's 10 contacts, like PLG users, map them all to one person or one account, figure that all out upfront. And that is definitely required for like very specific business models. The other thing we're kind of seeing over time is the system is actually pretty good at figuring out what the golden record is in real time. Like if it finds two results, like 2 Salesforce entries, one has a bunch of details associated with it and the other doesn't, it kind of defaults to the good one, right? So it's doing joins in real time and kind of checking. So it's almost like just-in-time golden record checks versus predefining it against every possible data source. I think both are useful in different situations, and we've spent a ton of time doing like the golden record in the traditional sense.
It's a hard problem, man, because like
super hard. Yeah.
You may have 3 records that are the same John Doe, but in one of them he gave you a cell phone, and another one he gave you like a work phone, and another he gave you a personal email, and then another he gave you like a old work email. How does the reasoning? And I guess this is where you go to the logic of like, injecting the logic into the agent to reason through like, hey, this is actually good data. This is good data. This is bad data. Reject it. That type of thing. And then like keep this golden record like up to date. Create a new field for an additional point of data that we get that is good. And so like I don't even like.
I kind of seen it like 2 ways. One is like you have to just do the work. You have to upfront like have the processes and systems to clean it up. And companies like Owner, Snowflake, Ramp, they like spend a ton of time and resources solving that problem, but they still don't have it solved. Like nobody has fully solved it that we've seen. It's a lot of work, and then you still get like 5 to 10% here and there will be a pain in the ass. So my like new thought is let's try to avoid it as much as possible and just make sure we're still just doing the right thing with the information that we have at the point. And that's actually working better in my experience, but at a smaller scale. Like when you get to a ramp scale where you have like multiple people touching the same contact, then you have to do it up front. So I think it depends on what the scale is. The system is very good. Same reason that Shrug just mentioned of having the database. It's very easy to figure out what the golden record is in a SQL database. It's very hard to do it in a CRM. Very easy to do it in SQL because you can basically just see like, all right, the SQL logic of if this and that or coalesce these two. So it ends up being way easier to do in this system than if you just tried to do it directly in Salesforce.
Yep. And then after you're done doing that, then you send it over to CRM and keep
exactly.
That. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Cool.
I know I was just going to share. I think the monitors thing that you guys are sharing is really interesting. I've kind of played around with other providers on this. I think where it gets like very interesting is because you guys are building the Postgres database and labeling all of it. Like, what I'm hearing from customers is they want to know how these signals evolve over time. So like if there's some way to string that together, I guess it's because you're giving me all the data where I can see that, but that's like very compelling.
Yeah, I think the first way people generally set this up is like you set up the signal and you send it to Slack, and it becomes really low sort of signal to noise ratio, or I myself just kind of start tuning them all out. So then the next step after all of that is almost signal stacking, or maybe even some light data science of, hey, which signals actually correlate to close, or maybe something useful. And what we've seen is not just like 1 or 2 signals, but a portfolio approach of like 10 or 15 for your target accounts, to then put those all together, and then maybe at a rate that you can actually consume maybe once a day. Hey, send me the updates from all my accounts with all the relevant signals, and then the ideal next best action or action item, right? If someone has a new hire, maybe it's not relevant at first glance, but then maybe let's go do more testing. Let's figure out, who's the hiring manager. Let's figure out who's the VP, put all that info together. And we've started to set this up for some of our clients where it's like synthesizing a bunch of maybe 15 to 20 very timely signals, and then sending them as a portfolio or a very short Slack message to them once a day or once a week to say, hey, here's what we know about your accounts. These are all the signals, and this is a data-driven reason why this signal is relevant. So here's the next best action that you can kind of take based on what we've seen work historically.
That's great.
Go ahead, Albert.
Oh, thanks. Actually, my question was more about the engagement layer. I know that Deepline just covers the data plumbing, aggregation, and well, I'm saying this because I come from the other side of the spectrum. I was working for a go-to-market SaaS, more similar to Unify or Ample Market, and we were our target customer was basically a not so technical one, so user friendliness, and all-in-one was our what we sold. It went pretty fine, and well, now I stopped working there, and where I see where this. Okay, my concern with Deepline is about the engagement that when you try to connect LinkedIn, all these programmatic benefits, I think break. Not sure if I'm right, but for every campaign, you have to do the field mapping, connecting the fields, going back and forth to Lemlist or to Hayrich. I wonder whether you are also having this kind of problems, because I know for mail it's great. Like for instantly, you can send all the personalized copies straight to the campaigns, but not sure if for LinkedIn this is also so seamless, or how do you handle it?
Can I make sure I understand? Mind clarifying?
Sorry. It was.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I just want to make sure I understand the use case. Is it LinkedIn specific that you're kind of focused on?
Yeah. So it was just connecting, sending a sequence in LinkedIn. So whether you can handle it programmatically or not, right?
And could you say the field mapping issue again, or why it didn't work in your experience, or what was breaking there?
Yes, when connecting a campaign, a multi-channel campaign, for example, typically when using Clay, you have to first create the campaign in Lemlist, then get the campaign ID into the Clay, and then doing also all the field mapping for all the columns, for the personalization fields. And actually, I didn't try with Deepline, but I wonder whether this is also the case, or you can launch campaigns seamlessly.
It's fairly seamless. I think the field mapping thing that you pointed out is a problem in terms of consistency. So you have to kind of like, let's say you have some custom concept that's very unique to what you guys are doing. Let's say for us, it's like go-to-market model or something. That doesn't really matter what it is, but it has to be something that's not like a standard data point in any of the platforms. And we want to insert like, hey, you have a PLG motion or sales-led motion or an enterprise motion. And that concept is just us. And then if I tell Claude to add it to a campaign once, it's going to work. It'll be fine. And then if I try to copy that campaign and then populate that second campaign, I have to know that that field name is the same. So you do have to keep track of like what field names you're creating, but creating one, like doing it is very easy. You can also test it and say, hey, look at the sequence and look at the data points that you have and make sure that they match. So it's fairly seamless. The APIs that we handle well, I would say Lemlist is the easiest to work with. That's the sending tool we use. Salesforce is good. I think that they have LinkedIn as well. HeyReach, you can't, I don't know if you can create campaigns yet, but when I checked a couple months ago, you cannot create campaigns. So you have to like, oh, you can via API now? Perfect. Okay,
Yeah,
so that
they released a CLI, and in this CLI, pretty much anything you can do in the UI, you can now do via API and MCP. So yeah.
Perfect. So I'm a couple months out of date there. So HeyReach will be the same. I need to double check that we have the create and endpoint set up. But for the most part, it's pretty trivial. Happy to, I think we have some examples on our docs actually. There's one for like LinkedIn commenters, like go find all the people who commented on the competitor's post, create a sequence and add them to it. And it's all just one prompt.
Okay, thanks. I'll check that out. Yeah, yes. For list building, yeah, I know.
Albert, what harness do you use? Are you in Cloud Code or Codex or?
I use Cloud Code.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I built this with HeyReach. It's really, really good. I'm assuming that the Lemlist API also gives, or CLI gives you like access to create campaigns or no?
Yes.
So yeah, so then you just pretty much would tell Cloud Code to learn that documentation and spin up new campaigns as you see fit. I know in at least in HeyReach, every time I do I will get like a jobs requirement from Deepline. I'll then tell Claude to write the copy based on what's in the job description, and it'll create a custom message per node inside of HeyReach. And then when the list goes into HeyReach, it's a custom like column, if you will. And that's where it's pulling the messaging from. So you could do that all programmatically. I would imagine if Lemlist allows you to do a similar thing.
Yeah, exactly. I personally don't love agents writing by copy, which is why we do like the more variable approach, because I just haven't nailed that copywriting yet. But it does, that is how we see some people do, like the icebreaker, one opener that's very specific, and then the rest of it is templated. And that works perfectly as well.
I don't like it either, but when you add a voice to like, hey, sound like this, don't do this, don't do that, it comes out actually pretty nice.
Nice. Perfect. I might ask you for your voice there, because I'm not able to get it to sound anything like anything I want to say. Perfect. Awesome. Does that answer your question, Albert?
Yeah, and another little one regarding the campaign steps. It's also generated by Deepline, and then that's fed with the, I don't know, a YAML format into HeyReach and Lemlist. Is Deepline the one generating the steps and then feeding?
Exactly. Yeah. So it will. We have like a default recommendation of what we do, but you can definitely customize it to what makes sense for you. So it will generate like the sequence steps of. I think for LinkedIn it does like connect, send connection, wait 2 days or 1 day after the connection accepted, then 3 messages with time in between. But it again depends on what you're trying to do. So it's pretty flexible. What I actually found is super helpful is sometimes it's more annoying to describe what you're trying to do in the CLI. You can like just create the sequence really quickly. And then you can copy the URL to the sequence, give it to the CLI and say, store this as the template that I want to copy from now on.
Okay, thanks. May I ask any frictions you are encountering maybe with the LinkedIn part, or?
You broke up a little bit. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch the question. You broke up a little bit.
Sorry, I just asked whether you are having any frictions with the LinkedIn connection with Lemlist, or is
Not that I'm aware of. Generally, they're pretty. They put limitations on how many you can send, like volume. And if you're under that volume, we haven't had anyone report any issues yet. Yeah, I think it's like 30 connections per day, 100 actions total. So yeah, there are like rate limits effectively. But HeyReach and Lemlist, all our customers on there have not reported anything that I'm aware of.
okay? Amazing, thanks. Well,
Yeah, I would definitely use one of those two though. A lot of the ones that we've seen that are like more AI SDR like I've had much worse feedback on. Like Goji Berry is the one that I think a few people got banned from.
Right.
Yeah,
So
the Lemlist and HeyReach.
the steps to get started is pretty straightforward. You can just come to integrations and then connect to your sequencer, and then you can follow the doc that Jay sent, which is, prompt Claude to say, hey, Deepline GTM, set up a campaign for me, and then maybe test it out on a few individuals, and we can go from there.
Can I piggyback off of this now that we're here?
Yeah.
So one issue that I was having, and by the way, maybe Anand could take a look at the HeyReach CLI there. So I just dropped in the link. But one of the issues that I was having when doing the multi-channel campaign was that if I would get a reply on instantly, I needed HeyReach to stop its campaign. And if I got a reply on HeyReach, I needed to stop the campaign instantly, right? And then they wanted to add nooks, but we just started with those two prongs, those two channels, right? So in render, I put in some logic. I think it was like a Python script, right? That would say if either or reply, stop the other from, continuing the sequence. So I'm wondering if we have everything integrated in Deepline, these sequencers, right? In workflows, is there a way to stop either one from like, I guess, like, is there a way for you to stop the contact for keep on going in the campaign?
Yeah, I've set that up for our stuff internally, as well as unsubscribes. It's generally good to sync your unsubscribes between platforms. I don't know if I'm doing that like the most efficient way. It's probably like one, you should make your core unsubscribe platform and then sync everything else between it. I also think that HeyReach and Instantly, or is it Smart Lead, that have the native integration where you can just have it auto set up?
I don't think HeyReach integrates with Smart Lead because I'm wiring that up right now.
Got it.
But really, I'm actually working with the tech stack that is HeyReach, Smart Lead, and Nooks. I found a suppression, like a way to kind of suppress across different channels. If you want to like jam on that, but Deepline did have something for that. Then like I could have probably solved it like way faster for sure.
Got it.
Well, this is where I was hoping workflows came in, right? Because if they're able to get a webhook saying like, hey, there was a reply, and it says, okay, cool, this unique person, right? These are the ideas in the other three channels. Let's stop them all, dude. That's a game changer. Like, or not game changer, but that's like pretty much like
you could do that.
What I'm hoping that you can do without like an N8N or whatever,
It's a bit of a, I guess you have to think through the steps yourself, where you'll have one workflow that enrolls folks in the campaigns, and then one that can listen to webhooks, so unsubscribe, etc. You have a separate workflow that grabs those and then propagates out the unsubscribe to the different tools. So you can set that up, but then you have to think through the different, I guess, state machine, for lack of a better word, yourself. Of unsubscribe one, run this workflow, go ahead and unsubscribe on Lemlist, Nooks, instantly, all of the above.
Yeah.
So I would prompt it, give it a shot, and I do think it'll work out of the box pretty easily.
Yeah, and you would love to jam on it, because that would be a nice skill to learn. Because the other thing is like we're thinking simplistically in the sense that this is one campaign. Well, what if you're working with an organization that does multi-campaigns, right? Where like you're listening to inbound stuff and that person comes in as an inbound. Now you want to shut down every other outbound campaign that they're in, or maybe you're running 3 outbound campaigns at the same time. For example, this dinner that you might be hosting, you're inviting the same person, but then also you know that they're going to show up at Dreamforce. So you're sending like another campaign for like Dreamforce things, right? Like if you get a reply, can you shut them all down? And like In my mind, it's like very difficult to figure out how to shut them down. As an SDR, you'd have to do that manually. Like as soon as you.
So Willie, to make sure I understand, it's almost like or I'm trying to simplify it. Is it almost just like a suppressor endpoint of like any time an action? I'm going to send you maybe 20 different actions, and then I want one place where if I send it to here, it just goes, finds this person in every system and says, don't send them anything else.
Yep, because we're already engaged.
Already engaged.
We don't want to like pester the prospect, you know?
Yeah. And it should only be at the contact level. Would you want to do it at the account level too?
I mean, that's tough because like sometimes you need a multi-thread and multi-cell like into different departments. So it's like my knee-jerk reaction would be no if you're selling into like an enterprise. But like, you know, sometimes you get a meeting and like the leadership is just like, don't touch that account anymore. Like, so it depends. It's I know that's not helpful.
No, yeah, that's helpful. Got it. I think I have a pretty good understanding. We're sort of doing it, but I'm doing it point to point right now, like one between each of our providers, but that doesn't solve what you're describing. And then, so it's basically like a list of potential suppression endpoints. And anytime anything happens, we want to automatically suppress and pause.
For sure within the campaign, right? Like within a campaign, Dreamforce, for example, right? If that one we have like 7 different channels where we're sending messaging from, then yeah, like get the engagement and shut down everything else that is being like orchestrated. That I think that's like an easier solvable problem. Because right now, again, like what I was doing was I literally was putting everything in render, telling this like Python script, like if you get a reply, shut it down on either or, and there were just 2 channels. But you know, Lucas here has like 3.
Yeah.
So it's like.
And last question is, it should pause the campaign, like specifically pause the campaign. Should it change status to like interested or any of those like?
Oh, for sure. Deposition. Or what is it called?
Disposition. Yeah.
Disposition. Thank you.
Disposition.
should be something that's flipped in the CRM. I would say.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I can take a stab. I think this should be fairly straightforward. We should actually probably be doing it for unsubscribes anyways. Now that I think about it, that is super painful, and so I spent a bunch of time on it.
Like someone tells you on the phone, "Do not call me again," or do you mean
no, like email unsubscribe specifically.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Clara.
Yeah.
I know we didn't get to your cyber crypto stuff, Clara. Next time, we'll send over some details. Appreciate it, everyone. I do have to run as well. We'll send over recording notes. Lucas, Willie, I'll let you know when we have an example that might be a good fit for what you're describing.
For sure.
Cool.
And then Lucas, if you want to jam, happy to do it, dude.
That's it. I'm gonna do that. Cheers.
See you guys.
Bye.